So on your tables, you've got some Bibles as well if you want to follow it along. But we're going to read from Matthew chapter 3. We're going to read out the NIV version. Matthew 3, verse 13. Words are going to be on the screen as well. Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to be baptized by John. But John tried to deter him, saying, "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" Jesus replied, "Let it be so now. It is proper for us to do this to fulfill all righteousness." Then John consented. As soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased." Do bear with me a moment. Keep that open. I'm just going to rearrange the stage slightly. Wonderful. Stuff everywhere. Wonderful. Well, like I said, my name is Jim. I'm the vicar here, and a very warm welcome to you if it's your first time with us or you've not been for a while. A particular warm welcome. It's good to see some familiar faces who are visiting as well. You'll notice on your table you've got some smaller Jenga blocks and some Duplo blocks, and as we go through this tour, I'll invite you to be using them, so just listen in at the right time to do what to do. You won't need to talk, but you can just build and listen. But I'm going to start with what might sound like a seemingly random question as we begin what's going to be a new vision series over the next 5 weeks, The House That God Builds. And my question is simply this. I don't know how many of you like grand designs and stuff like that, but my question is simply this. If you were going to build a new house this year, where would you start? If you were going to build a new house this year, where would you start? If you've got Jenga blocks, maybe get ready with those. So maybe your mind goes straight towards paint. Maybe I'm going to think about the paint color. So if you get a Jenga block, just put it upright on your table as you go like that. Think maybe it's paint you're going to build with. Maybe some of you, like you're more into the interior design, and you're thinking, "Oh, I've got this lovely chair. I've got this lovely sofa. My lounge is going to look like this." And so you think, "Okay, I'm going to stick another Jenga block on. I'm going to build my furniture and my design first." Maybe you're just more of a practical person. You think, "No, the kitchen definitely needs a sink. That's the most important thing." And so you're going to build that. Now, I don't know if you've built your Jenga blocks, but as you can see, this is not very stable. We've built everything above ground. And hopefully you know that the most important thing when you're building a house is not what goes on overground, but it's what goes on underground. You start with the foundations. Because if the foundations aren't right, it doesn't matter what your house looks like. Sooner or later, cracks, knock your towers down, cracks will appear and the house will collapse. And so as we start a new year, as we start this vision series, the question I really want to ask you all is, what are you building on? What are you building on? As a church, what is it that we're building on? And our passage today speaks to us about this. Because this passage today says to you, before you build, know that you're beloved. Before you build, know that you're beloved. You see, the trouble is we often set off a bit like this, a bit like the jelly. We build our life on things that even though we think are solid, actually are a bit more like building on jelly. We build maybe on how confident we feel, or maybe how successful we are, or maybe how much money we're earning, or how healthy we are, or how many friends we have, or how good I'm doing at school. We build on all these things. And the problem is that when those things begin to wobble, is the house comes down, and actually so do we. Which is why foundations matter. What we build our life on, the things that you put in the foundations of your life really, really matter. And in our passage today, we're reminded that before we build our lives, we're beloved by the Father. Being loved by God our Father is our foundation for life. It's our solid foundation. It's the only thing in the whole universe, the whole of history, that will never change, is that you are loved. Everything else builds from there. Before we build, we're beloved. Now just maybe leave the blocks alone for a moment. And I just want to be honest with you. At the beginning of this week even, I was really struggling. I wasn't in a great place. I'd been looking at the church budget spreadsheet for the year ahead. And if I'm feeling really honest, this week's I've just felt so anxious and sick. I could see, don't worry, this isn't a giving talk. I could see the gap that we need to close and the responsibility that sits with that. And I could feel myself spiraling. Nothing dramatic had happened, but my foundations were really being tested. Now for you, it probably isn't the church budget that you're worrying about. But you might be really worried about money. You might be worried about health. You might be worried about yourself or someone you love being sick. You might be worried about your friends at school or not having any friends at school. You might be worried about a relationship. And the thing is about worry and fear is it has a way of grabbing hold of our attention, and it begins to tell you lies about who you are. It begins to affect how you live. It begins to affect even choices that you might make. Unless we remember that perfect love casts out fear. That Jesus says we do not need to worry. Unless we remember and know and believe that before we build, we are beloved, we can get into all sorts of dark places. Now this time, could you just clear a bit of space on your table, and could you go for the Duplo blocks in your basket instead? And just put down a couple of Duplo blocks to make a good foundation. And so as we look at the year ahead, as I think about my vision for the year, about who I want to be, I don't know if you've got a vision for who you want to be this year, but as we think about the vision for the church that God is calling us to be, to grow in faith and to grow in family, when we consider that house and that vision that God is building, this passage and the baptism of Jesus matters so much. You see, this moment comes right at the beginning of Matthew's gospel, right at the beginning of the New Testament. It comes before all of Jesus' teaching. It comes before Jesus has performed a miracle. It comes before all the crowds. It comes before he dies on the cross to save you and me from our sins. It comes before he rises from the dead. You see, Jesus hasn't done anything yet. Maybe just stack another Duplo block on top. Jesus hasn't done anything yet, and yet that is the point at which his Father says to him, we've got a slide with it on just to remind you, "This is my Son whom I love. With him I am well pleased." The NRSV puts it like this: "This is my Son, the beloved." The Bible can't come up with a deeper, better, richer term of what it means to be loved. It's precious, the most loved. So before Jesus achieves anything, before Jesus obeys anything, before sacrifice, Jesus is beloved first. And this is the foundation on which everything else will be built. Now stack a few more Duplo blocks on. Hopefully it's a nice, firm foundation. Because you see, this isn't just true for Jesus, it's true for us as well. That before we build, we are beloved. And so often we build on the wrong foundations. Our identity is not our role in church. Our identity is not our past experiences. Our identity isn't whether we feel fed or overlooked, whether we feel spiritual or not. It's not I really don't belong here. It's not I'm carrying too much history. It's not I'm not as strong as others. None of those are foundations. Our identity is this. We are beloved. That is what gives us our identity, and that is what God chooses to build his house upon. As Jesus comes up from the water, it says heaven opens and the Spirit descends and the voice of the Father speaks. In that moment, Jesus gazes up to heaven and he sees his Father's gaze back on him. Now for Jesus, the shadow of the cross is real. It stands before him. He knows it's coming. But that isn't where he's focused. That's not what he's staring at. That's not where his identity comes from. As he begins his ministry, even in the shadow of the cross, he knows he is beloved. His eyes are fixed on the gaze of the Father who's gazing at him. That's the foundation. And this week, for me, as anxious as I was, when I began to share honestly with one or two others, when they prayed for me, they encouraged me to turn my gaze towards God. And I realized something simple and profound. I knew it up here, but I was reminded down here that as I gazed back to my Father, I realized his gaze was always and has been and was resting on me. Nothing had changed on the spreadsheets. The shadow of that was still there. But my perspective had changed. I'm beloved by God before I'm responsible for anything. Because before anything is built or solved, I am beloved. And so my question for us this year, as we seek to grow in faith and as we seek to grow in family, as God builds his house amongst us, my question is, what are you building on? What are we going to be building on? Because whatever our very real hopes or fears, whatever our worries, our challenges, our opportunities, the fact is that we are standing in the gaze of the Father, and we're invited to turn our gaze to him and to know that before we build, we're beloved.